Amy, what's wrong? Lily's voice suddenly pulled me out of my chaotic thoughts. I looked up and saw her standing in front of me, her eyes filled with deep concern. At that moment, I stood at the door of my home, looking through the glass at him and her. They looked like a perfect couple, so close, laughing carelessly. And I was just a bystander. He was my closest lover. Once we had spent countless days and nights together, striving for our future. I once naively thought our love could withstand any challenge. But now, everything in front of me had changed. His betrayal was like a sharp blade, ruthlessly piercing the most vulnerable part of my heart. I forced myself to close my eyes and took a deep breath. I'm fine. My voice was calm, but it carried an unnoticeable tremor, even to me. You're fine. Lily didn't believe me. My friend knew me better than anyone else. She could see the pain in my heart. She reached out to pull me away from the glass door, but I didn't move. I watched him outside, the man I once thought would be with me for life. His smile with her was so warm, so intimate, and I felt like I was an unnecessary person. Like a broken puzzle piece, trying to fit into this once perfect world, but no longer belonging. I looked up at Lily. Her gaze was full of confusion and concern, but I just shook my head. I'm fine. I closed my eyes, turned, and walked back into the house, leaving her with only my back. The air inside seemed to suddenly grow heavy, and I was surrounded by an indescribable feeling of oppression. That day, everything changed. Back at home, I stood in the empty living room, feeling the silence around me. I kept replaying the scene in my mind, his intimacy with her, the warmth that should have been mine and his. I used to think he loved me deeply, and that love was once my greatest support. I squatted down, leaning against the sofa, and looked at my trembling hands. My heart was a mess. I didn't know how to face any of this. Why her? Who was she? What did she have that I didn't? I'd asked myself countless times why I silently endured his small betrayals, his indifference, his neglect. I always told myself that, as long as I was good enough, he would notice me, love me. But now I realize that all my efforts and persistence were for a person who wasn't worth it. Why did you do this? I muttered softly, not knowing if I was asking myself or him. The voice echoed in the empty room, as if reminding me that I was no longer the woman who would cry to win a man back. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the darkening sky. At that moment, the entire world seemed to fall silent. My heart finally calmed down. I no longer wanted to ask why because I knew there was no answer. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and finally calmed myself down. Standing by the window, a sense of determination arose from deep within me. I would become stronger, leave behind this burden, and walk away from this painful relationship. I would no longer be the woman who let others control her, but one who would take control of her own future. I didn't need him anymore. I only needed myself. That night, I didn't look at any of the messages he left me, nor did I wonder if he would come back. I sat at my desk, picked a pen, and started making plans. I had once relied on him desperately, thinking his love would give me security and strength. But now I knew I had to reevaluate myself and pave my own path. I don't rely on anyone anymore. Only I am my most reliable support, I whispered to myself. This sentence felt like a declaration, etched deeply into my heart. I used to rely on him when I was lost, hoping he would provide me with support. But now, I didn't need that anymore. I flipped open the work plan on my desk and began focusing on my career. I knew this was what I needed to do now. Only by succeeding in my career could I free myself from relying on a man and truly take control of my own destiny. I told myself, from now on I will live for myself and no one else. That night, I made a change and decided that I would no longer be the woman who was weak, who could be betrayed, but instead, I would become a woman with a strong heart, brave enough to face challenges. Since that night, I began a complete transformation. I no longer focused on whether he would come back, nor did I obsess over his relationship with her. I concentrated on work and set a new goal for myself: success. Nothing could free me from the shadows of my past better than realizing my self-worth and taking control of my own life. I'll make myself stronger, no longer relying on anyone. This phrase became my motto, repeated day after day, night after night. Whenever I faced difficulty or felt down, I reminded myself, this road, I'm walking it alone. No one can support me except myself. I returned to the company, taking responsibility for the tasks that should have been mine. My career wasn't bad. In fact, I had once had many promising opportunities. But back then, I was always distracted, always habitually placing my focus on my relationship, neglecting the things that were more important. Now, I decided to change all that. The company headquarters was located in a skyscraper in the city center, the place where I had once worked hard. Walking into the office building, I was no longer the woman dependent on my past relationship. I was a determined, goal-driven professional. Every step I took felt filled with strength, and I could feel the confidence rising from within. On my first day back, I proactively requested a meeting with my boss to negotiate more project resources. Though my request was straightforward, my attitude left no room for dismissal. In the past, I had been afraid to directly express my needs, worried others might think I was too eager. But now, I understood. If I wanted success, I had to be willing to fight for it, to challenge others. "Amy, I think your performance is showing more foresight now," my boss said. I could almost feel the praise in his eyes. That feeling was more direct and powerful than any promise from a man. I began taking charge of key projects that were crucial for the future of the company. Leading my team, we pushed forward with efficient execution, and many people started to look at me with newfound respect. Those who had once underestimated me now came to seek my advice. This was the life I wanted: independent, confident, fulfilled. However, what made me feel the most liberated wasn't the achievements at work, but the sense of freedom I got from finally breaking free from the past relationship. Late at night, I no longer tossed and turned, wondering if he would come back, or waiting for him to make promises. The dependence I had on him had finally vanished. At first, Tom tried to contact me. I knew his regret was real, but I never responded. Whenever he sent a message, I ignored it. Whenever he called, I silenced the phone. My heart told me, this was how I let go of the past. Only by letting go could I welcome a better life. I began to get used to going to the office alone every morning, deciding my own time and arranging everything myself. Without Tom's interference or unnecessary emotional entanglements, I became clearer and clearer about what I wanted and how to fight for it. And he, the one I once thought was my support, no longer affected my decisions. That love, which once made me weak, gradually became the driving force for me to move forward. Every time I saw my progress in the workplace, every time I saw myself confidently facing challenges in life, I was more certain. The further I went, the less likely I would look back. As my career gradually flourished, I began to feel the sense of revenge. Revenge wasn't about silly emotional outbursts or trying to retaliate against those who hurt me. It was about surpassing them. Tom's betrayal once caused me pain, but now I understood one thing. The best revenge is to live better than they could have ever imagined. To make myself stronger, I began stepping into high-level social circles both inside and outside the company. Those who had once looked down on me now started to notice me, inviting me to various business events. My name began to appear more frequently in company meeting minutes and project reports. As for Tom, he still observed me silently. Whenever I had a new breakthrough, he would appear in my line of sight, regret and unwillingness flashing in his eyes. But I no longer paid attention to him. Even when he tried to get closer, I pushed him away with indifference. "I'm no longer the Amy you knew," I told myself, my eyes firm and my resolve unwavering. Since I decided to completely let go of the past, everything became different. Every day I was filled with motivation, and the power rising from within me made me more confident. In the workplace, my name began to appear in more and more important decisions. Many people began to seek my advice, and some colleagues even privately called me a strong woman. I knew I didn't need anyone's approval, but when that approval came more and more, my heart filled with a sense of accomplishment. The feeling of victory from my own efforts and wisdom far exceeded the false sense of security I once relied on from others. However, there were still some interludes in the process. Tom, the man who once betrayed me, began taking a series of actions to try to re-enter my life as he gradually realized the changes in me. The first time he appeared was at a business gathering. I was talking to an important client when suddenly, I felt a familiar presence behind me. I turned around and it was Tom. He was dressed in a suit, neat and clean, but there was a hint of confusion and helplessness in his eyes. The moment our gazes met, I felt a strange emotion rush through my heart. It was his former gentleness and regret. "Amy," he said my name, his voice carrying a hint of pleading. A surge of anger and relief mixed within me. I ignored him and turned back to continue talking to the client. The client smiled and nodded at me as if Tom wasn't even there, while Tom stood there, like an abandoned clown, his fingers trembling slightly, regret flashing in his eyes. At that moment, I finally realized how much I used to depend on him. But now, I don't need anyone to define my future. I don't need him, nor do I need him to beg for my forgiveness. A few days later, Tom called me. His voice lacked the arrogance of the past, replaced with humility and a trace of pleading. "Amy, I know I was wrong. Can you give me a chance? I'm willing to do anything for you." On the other end, his voice grew low, filled with regret and unease. This tone, which I once longed for, now only made me feel ridiculous. "What would you do for me?" I asked coldly. "I'm willing to start over, fix our relationship, and do everything for you." His voice was filled with helpless pleading, but I remained silent, only wanting to ask myself, "Are you even worth fixing?" He once made me cry, betrayed my deepest trust. Now, all his regrets seemed so trivial, even annoying. The pain from the past had made me stronger, and I was no longer the woman who would give up herself for love. I hung up the phone and my mood suddenly became calm. I started to realize that my revenge was never about having him back, it was about becoming stronger and having the power to control my own life. Tom's appearance, though it caused some emotional turbulence, only confirmed one truth. I didn't need him. I didn't need anyone to prove my worth. His call didn't shake me. Instead, it made me realize that I had been living for someone who wasn't worth it. Now, I had finally found the strength to live for myself. My life, my success, my future only I could decide. I began to invest more time and energy into my work. Gradually, Tom's presence seemed to blur. Every time he reappeared in my world, I saw him as nothing more than a passerby, a painful memory. His pleas no longer moved me, instead reminding me of those heartbroken days. And I had walked too far, too high to look back. A few months later, Tom finally realized that his regret wouldn't change anything. So, he shifted his strategy, choosing to appear in my world with a humbler attitude. Every time he saw me, he tried to show his transformation and effort, hoping to touch me. He started to actively participate in business events I led and acted unusually humble, occasionally offering his support and help. He even asked to collaborate with me on a project, trying to make up for his past mistakes through work. "Amy, we can start over, if you're willing," he said, his tone increasingly humble, almost pleading. But every time I looked at him, all I felt was indifference and disappointment. His actions only strengthened my resolve. I no longer needed him. I was no longer the woman who would bend for him. His humbling actions wouldn't sway me, and I wouldn't let myself lose myself again in past pain. I never thought I'd go this far. The one who depended on love and compromised for it had long disappeared with time. Now I wasn't anyone's accessory but a woman with her own career and life. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the new me, a woman with strength, wisdom, and determination. However, as I grew stronger, Tom's figure still occasionally appeared in my life. Whether in the workplace or at social events, he always lingered at the edge of my sight. Every time he appeared, the indifference and disdain in my heart became clearer. He was no longer the man I could rely on, not even the one I once loved. One day, I was talking to an important client when suddenly my phone vibrated. I glanced at it and saw it was a message from Tom. "Amy, I know I've made unforgivable mistakes, but I still hope you can give me a chance." Just a few short words, but they made me laugh coldly. I didn't rush to respond, continuing my conversation with the client. Business had always been my priority, and I had gotten used to putting all my energy into my career. To me, the emotional problems that once kept me awake at night, breaking my heart, now seemed insignificant. But Tom's persistence couldn't be ignored. A few days later, he appeared again at a company banquet. This time he seemed determined, acting unusually humble and low-key. He hardly spoke to anyone, but his eyes kept darting towards me. He seemed to realize that the distance between us was far greater than he had imagined. I laughed and chatted with colleagues, ignoring his gaze, until he suddenly appeared in front of me, interrupting my conversation with the client. "Amy, I don't want to hurt you anymore. I really love you," he said in a low, almost powerless voice, his eyes filled with deep regret and pain. I looked at him, my eyes showing no anger, only calm and indifference. You love me? Do you know? Every word you say now is unnecessary. His face immediately changed, but he quickly regained his composure. He stood in front of me, head down, waiting for my response. But deep inside, I knew I would never be the Amy who would be swayed by him again. You say you love me, but why did you make me compromise again and again with your betrayal? I don't need you to define my life anymore. My words were like a heavy blow, striking deep into his heart. I could see the disappointment and pain in his eyes, the emotions that once made me soften, now turned into the fuel that pushed me forward. Tom didn't speak again. He just lowered his head and left the banquet hall. At that moment, my mood was calm. There was no anger, no regret, only a gentle sense of relief from the past. His exit seemed to be the last obstacle in my life. With his departure, my career began to explode. As a newly promoted core figure in the company, I took charge of several important projects and led my team to make breakthrough progress. I became more confident, stronger, and clearer about what I wanted. At that moment, I finally felt the most profound sense of fulfillment. It wasn't just the achievements in my career, but the self-recognition that came from within. I was no longer the woman who depended on others or on love to survive. I was standing at the peak, relying completely on my own strength. A few months later, I was promoted to vice president of the company, a position I never thought I could achieve. I stood in the office on the top floor, looking down at the entire city. The sunlight bathed me, and my heart was full of clarity, with no confusion, only clear goals and infinite possibilities. I knew that the pain and betrayal from the past had become my strongest driving force. Now, I no longer needed Tom or anyone to accompany me on the road ahead. I had my own strength and my own future. That day, Tom appeared before me again. Unlike before, he was dressed formally, and there was no regret in his eyes, only a firm determination. Amy, I know I can never make up for my mistakes, but I hope you understand my love for you has never changed. His voice was calmer than ever, but to me, it was like paper drifting in the wind, insignificant. I looked at him, paused for a moment, then finally spoke. Tom, I once thought you were an indispensable part of my life, but now, I understand what truly matters is only me. He didn't respond. He simply sighed deeply, and like a passerby turned and left my life. And I remained standing in my own world, continuing to walk towards an even more brilliant future. If you've also experienced betrayal, did you, like me, find your strength through the pain? Feel free to share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll continue bringing you more touching stories.